The rain-slicked streets of New York City shimmered under the neon glow. But inside the penthouse, the world felt like it was collapsing. Ethan Carter stood frozen, staring at the contract on his desk, the ink of his signature still fresh, binding him to a decision that now felt like a noose. He'd paid $10,000 a month to keep Julian Hayes by his side, a man whose smile could unravel him. But tonight, he'd learned the truth. Julian was no ordinary companion, was the heir to the Davis empire, worth billions. Ethan's heart pounded as he replayed the moment he'd stumbled across the article on his phone. Buried in a tabloid's gossip column, Julian Davis, long-lost heir to the Davis fortune, spotted in Manhattan. A photo of Julian, his sharp jawline unmistakable, stared back at him. The man he'd hired to fill the void in his life, to be his confidant, his lover, his escape from loneliness, had been lying to him for months. Ethan's knees buckled, and he sank into the leather chair, the city skyline blurring through the floor-to-ceiling windows. 6 months ago, Ethan had been a different man, successful but hollow. At 32, he'd built Carter Tech into a cybersecurity empire. But the late nights coding and the endless boardroom battles left him isolated. He craved connection, someone to share the quiet moments. But trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Then he'd found the discreet agency, elite companions, promising tailored relationships for the elite. It felt transactional, cold, but safe. No strings, no heartbreak, just a contract. Julian had walked into his life like a storm. Tall, with eyes like a summer sky and a laugh that felt like sunlight. He was everything Ethan hadn't dared to hope for. Their first meeting at a tucked-away cafe in Greenwich Village had been electric. Julian had leaned across the table, his fingers brushing Ethan's as he teased him about his overpriced latte. "You're paying for the vibe, not the coffee," he'd said, grinning. Ethan was hooked. The arrangement was simple, $10,000 a month for Julian's time, his attention, his affection. Ethan told himself it was enough, someone to attend galas, share late-night takeout, and fill the silence of his penthouse. But Julian was more than a hired companion. He listened, really listened, when Ethan rambled about code or vented about his board's demands. He'd stay up late, sprawled on the couch, debating philosophy or mocking Ethan's taste in sci-fi. And when their hands intertwined during a quiet moment, or when Julian's lips brushed his in the dark, it felt real. Ethan had fallen hard. He'd started to dream of a future beyond the contract, of mornings tangled in sheets, of a life where Julian wasn't paid to stay. But now, the truth shattered that fantasy. Julian wasn't just a charming nobody, was Julian Davis, heir to a real estate dynasty that owned half of Manhattan. Why would a billionaire play this game? Why lie? Ethan's phone buzzed, snapping him back to the present. A text from Julian. "Dinner tonight. That Italian place you love." The casual tone stung, as if nothing had changed. Ethan's fingers hovered over the keyboard, torn between confronting him and pretending he didn't know. He typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, he sent, "Sure." 8 p.m. The restaurant was a warm glow of candlelight and soft jazz, a stark contrast to the storm in Ethan's chest. Julian was already there, leaning back in his chair, his dark sweater hugging his frame. He stood when Ethan approached, his smile disarming. But Ethan saw it now, the guarded edge in his eyes, the careful way he moved, like someone hiding a secret. "You okay?" Julian asked, his voice low, concerned. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Ethan forced a smile, sitting across from him. "Long day. Tell me about yours." Julian launched into a story about a street artist he'd met in Soho, his hands animated, his laugh infectious. Ethan watched, torn between the man he'd fallen for and the stranger he'd just discovered. Was any of it real? The way Julian's knee brushed his under the table. The way he'd lean in, voice soft. To share a private joke, could that be faked? As the waiter cleared their plates, Ethan couldn't hold it in any longer. "Julian," he said, his voice steady but sharp. "Who are you? Really?" Julian's fork froze midair. His eyes flickered, just for a moment, before he set it down. "What do you mean?" "I saw the article. Julian Davis. The Davis Empire." Ethan's voice cracked, betraying the hurt he'd tried to bury. "You've been lying to me." The air between them thickened. Julian's face softened, but not with guilt, with something closer to resignation. "Ethan, I was going to tell you." "When?" "After another month of my money. Or when you got bored of playing pretend." Ethan's words came out harsher than he meant, but the betrayal burned. Julian leaned forward, his voice urgent. "It wasn't about the money. I never needed it. I needed you." Ethan laughed, bitter. "You expect me to believe that? You're a billionaire. Julian, why the hell would you sign up to be my paid boyfriend?" Julian's eyes locked onto his, unflinching. "Because I wanted to be someone else. Someone who wasn't defined by my family's name, their expectations. When I met you, I wasn't Julian Davis. I was just Julian. And you saw me. Not the empire. Not the headlines. Me." Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at him. So what was this? A game? A way to slum it with the tech guy? "No," Julian said, his voice breaking. "It was real. Every moment." Ethan stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "I need to think. I can't do this right now." He walked out into the rain, the city's hum drowning out Julian's voice calling after him. Back in his penthouse, Ethan poured a whiskey, the burn doing little to dull the ache. He'd built his life on control, on knowing every variable. But Julian had rewritten the code of his heart. Could he trust him again? Or was this just the start of a deeper betrayal? As he stared at the city below, his phone lit up with another text from Julian. "Please, let me explain. Meet me tomorrow. I'll tell you everything." Ethan didn't reply, but he knew he'd go. He had to know the truth, even if it broke him. The next morning, Ethan stood outside a small bookstore in Brooklyn, the meeting spot Julian had chosen. The air was crisp, the kind of autumn day that made New York feel alive. But Ethan's nerves were raw. He'd barely slept, replaying Julian's words. It was real. Every moment. They echoed in his mind, battling the sting of betrayal. He wanted answers. But more than that, he wanted to believe Julian's feelings weren't part of the lie. Julian appeared around the corner, his hands stuffed in his coat pockets, his expression a mix of hope and fear. "You came," he said, his voice soft but carrying the weight of relief. "Don't make me regret it," Ethan replied, his tone guarded. He gestured toward the bookstore. "Why here?" "It's quiet, neutral, and it's where I go when I need to think." Julian pushed open the door, the bell jingling softly. Inside, the smell of old books and coffee enveloped them. They found a corner table, tucked away behind stacks of novels, and sat in uneasy silence. Julian broke it first. "I owe you the truth. All of it." He took a deep breath, his fingers tracing the edge of the table. "My family's empire, it's a cage. My father, Richard Davis, built it on control, and he expected me to fall in line. Private schools, boardrooms, a life mapped out before I could talk. But I hated it. The pressure, the expectations. So, 5 years ago, I ran." Ethan leaned back, Processing. Ran. You're a billionaire. People don't just walk away from that. Julian's laugh was hollow. You'd be surprised what you'll do to feel free. I cut ties. Changed my name to Julian Hayes. And started over. No trust fund. No connections. Just me. Figuring out who I am without the Davis name. Ethan's brow furrowed. And the agency. Why sign up to be whatever this was? Julian's eyes met his. Steady but vulnerable. I needed money to live. At first. The agency was a way to survive without dipping into my family's accounts. But when I met you, Ethan, it stopped being about the contract. You were different. You didn't care about status or power. You saw me as a person, not a legacy. Ethan wanted to believe him, but the hurt lingered. You could have told me. I trusted you. Julian, I let you in. I know, Julian said, his voice cracking. I wanted to. So many times. But every time I tried, I got scared. Scared you'd see me as the heir. Not the guy who loves your terrible taste in pizza or the way you hum when you're coding. I didn't want to lose that. Ethan's heart stuttered at the word loves. He looked away, his throat tight. So what now? Your family knows you're back in New York. That article wasn't a coincidence. Julian nodded, his jaw tight. My sister, Claire, found me. She's been trying to drag me back into the family for years. She tipped off the press, probably to force my hand. They want me to take over the empire. My father's sick. Ethan, he doesn't have long. The weight of Julian's words settled over them. Ethan saw the conflict in his eyes, the pull of duty versus the life he'd tried to build. What do you want? Ethan asked, his voice softer now. Julian reached across the table, his hand hovering near Ethan's, but not touching. I want you. I want us. But I don't know how to do that and be Julian Davis again. I'm scared it'll change everything. Ethan's chest ached with the honesty in Julian's voice. But doubt still gnawed at him. I need time, he said finally. I want to believe you, but I don't know if I can. Julian nodded, his eyes glistening. I'll wait. As long as it takes. They left the bookstore, walking in silence through Brooklyn's streets. Ethan's mind was a tangle of emotions: love, anger, hope, fear. He wanted to reach for Julian's hand, to feel the warmth that had grounded him for months. But he held back. Trust wasn't rebuilt in a day. That night, Ethan's phone rang. It was an unknown number, but the voice on the other end was sharp, commanding. Mr. Carter, this is Claire Davis. We need to talk about my brother. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? I want Julian back where he belongs, she said, her tone icy. And I know about your little arrangement. Stay out of his life, or I'll make sure your company pays the price. The line went dead. Ethan stared at the phone, his pulse racing. Claire Davis wasn't just a sister, she was a predator. And she'd just drawn a line in the sand. Ethan had built Carter Tech from nothing, fought off competitors and critics. But this was different. This was personal. He thought of Julian, the man who'd made him laugh, who'd held him through sleepless nights, who'd made him believe in love again. Was it worth fighting for? Or was Julian's world a world of empires and secrets too big for them to survive? Ethan stood in his office, the city skyline a blur beyond the glass. Claire's threat echoed in his mind, a cold reminder of the stakes. She wasn't just protecting her family's legacy, she was willing to destroy Ethan's to get what she wanted. He'd spent years building Carter Tech, pouring his soul into every line of code, every deal. But Julian was worth more than any empire. He hadn't seen Julian in 3 days. Not since the bookstore. Ethan had asked for time, but the silence was deafening. Every unanswered text, every empty evening, felt like a choice he wasn't ready to make. He missed Julian's laugh, the way he'd steal fries off Ethan's plate, the quiet moments when they'd sit on the balcony, the city humming below. But Claire's call had changed everything. This wasn't just about trust Anna Maria, it was about survival. Ethan's assistant buzzed the intercom. "Mr. Carter, there's a Claire Davis here to see you." His stomach dropped. He hadn't expected her to show up in person. "Send her in," he said, steeling himself. Claire swept into the room like she owned it, her tailored suit and sharp heels screaming power. Her resemblance to Julian was uncanny, same piercing blue eyes. Same commanding presence, but where Julian's warmth drew people in, Claire's gaze cut through them. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice smooth but laced with menace. "I'll make this quick. Walk away from my brother, or I'll leak your little arrangement to the press. A tech CEO paying for a boyfriend. Your investors won't like that." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're threatening me to protect your family's image. That's rich, coming from someone who tipped off the tabloids." Claire's lips curled into a smile, cold and calculated. "Julian's place is with us, not playing house with you. He's the heir to the Davis empire. You're a distraction. He's a person, not a pawn." Ethan snapped. "He doesn't want your empire. He doesn't know what he wants." Claire shot back. "He's been running from his responsibilities for years. I'm done letting him play pretend." Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. "If you cared about him, you'd let him choose his own life, not blackmail him into it." Claire's eyes narrowed. "You have 48 hours to end it, or I'll make sure Carter Tech is a footnote in next week's news." She left without another word, the door clicking shut behind her. Ethan sank into his chair, his mind racing. He could fight back Claire's threat, dig into the Davis family skeletons, but that would drag Julian into a war he didn't want. Ethan needed to see him, to know where they stood. He found Julian at the cafe where they'd first met, sitting at their usual table, a book in his hands. The sight of him, hair slightly messy, eyes soft with focus, made Ethan's chest ache. He slid into the seat across from him, and Julian looked up, startled. "You didn't text," Julian said, his voice cautious but hopeful. "Your sister paid me a visit," Ethan said, watching Julian's face. "She wants me gone. Threatened my company." Julian's expression darkened. "I'm sorry. I didn't know she'd go that far." "She's desperate to control you," Ethan said. "But I need to know. Julian, what do you want? Because I'm in this all the way. But I can't fight for us if you're not sure." Julian reached for Ethan's hand, his touch warm and steady. "I want you. I want a life where I'm not defined by my last name. But my father's dying. Ethan, they're pulling me back, and I don't know how to say no without losing everything." Ethan squeezed his hand, his heart torn. "You don't have to lose me, but you need to choose." Julian nodded, his eyes glistening. "Give me 1 week. I'll figure it out. I promise." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He paced his penthouse, the city's lights a mocking reminder of the life he'd built, one that felt empty without Julian. He wanted to trust him, to believe they could face Claire and the Davis empire together. But doubt crept in, whispering that love couldn't survive secrets this big. The next day, a breaking news alert lit up Ethan's phone. Davis empire in turmoil, heir Julian Davis to return. The article speculated about Julian's reappearance, painting him as the prodigal son ready to claim his throne. Ethan's stomach churned. Had Julian made his choice? Ethan stood outside the Davis Tower, a glass monolith that loomed over Manhattan. The news article had pushed him to act. He couldn't wait for Julian's decision. If they were going to fight for their future, Ethan needed to know where Julian stood. Now, he'd texted Julian to meet him here, at the heart of the empire that threatened to tear them apart. Inside, the lobby was all marble and gold, a testament to the Davis family's wealth. Julian was waiting near the elevators, his face pale, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low. "Claire's upstairs. She'll see this as a challenge." "Good," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I'm done hiding. I want you, Julian. All of you. But I need to know if you're in this with me." Julian's breath hitched, and for a moment, Ethan thought he'd pull away. Instead, Julian grabbed his hand, pulling him into a quiet alcove. "I went to see my father last night," Julian said, his voice trembling. "He's dying. Ethan. He begged me to take over, to keep the family together. But all I could think about was you." Ethan's heart pounded. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I'm not his heir. I'm not a Davis. Not anymore. I'm just Julian. And I want a life with you." Julian's eyes searched Ethan's, desperate for belief. "I meant it when I said I love you." The words hit Ethan like a wave, washing away the doubt that had haunted him. He cupped Julian's face, kissing him fiercely, the world fading around them. For the first time, it felt real, not a contract, not a lie, but a choice. The moment shattered when Claire's voice cut through the lobby. "Julian, what the hell is this?" They turned to see her striding toward them, her face a mask of fury. "You're throwing away your legacy for him," she spat, glaring at Ethan. Julian stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "I'm choosing my life, Claire. Not yours. Not father's, mine. And Ethan's part of it." Claire's eyes flashed, but before she could speak, Ethan cut in. "You can threaten me all you want, Claire. Leak the contract. Tank my company, I don't care. I'm not letting him go." For a moment, Claire looked stunned, her composure cracking. Then she turned on her heel and walked away, her silence more unsettling than her threats. That night, Ethan and Julian sat on the penthouse balcony, the city sprawling beneath them. Julian leaned against Ethan, his head resting on his shoulder. "I'm free," Julian whispered. "For the first time, I'm free." Ethan kissed his forehead, his heart full. "We're free." They'd face challenges, Claire's wrath, the press, the weight of two worlds colliding, but they'd face them together. Love wasn't a contract. It was a fight, a choice, a promise. And as the stars blinked above, Ethan knew they'd keep that promise, no matter the cost.